Novi Sad, a true example of an imperial city. It's found in Serbia's northern Vojvodina region, an area characterized by its Austro Hungarian past and influence. Today, it characterizes the diversity of Serbian towns and the people who built this place. It's beautiful, it's hip, and it's got a lot of charm. It's a city where you can really feel the history and understand the changes that Serbia has undergone in the last few centuries. The Austro-Hungarians left their mark here and created an old town that rivals the beauty of many cities around Central Europe. No trip to Serbia would be complete without checking out its second largest city, so that's what we're going to do today. Let's get it. We're starting our tour of Novi Sad here at Petrovaradine Fortress. It's a massive middle-aged fortress that was refortified and refortified and refortified, sitting above the mighty Danube River. This fortress is notable because it was said to be so impenetrable that while the Austrians were fighting various wars and Vienna was continuing to be occupied, they actually moved the crown jewels of the Austro-Hungarian Empire here. The fortress sits high on this hill, overlooking, of course, the Danube, and then from this side, overlooking a pretty thick forest on this side. This fortress, along with the fortress we saw in Niš and in Smederevo, became a staging ground for the many wars between the Ottomans and the people of the Balkans, the Christian kingdoms. This also became an important fortress, especially in the late 1600s and early 1700s, as the Austro-Hungarian Empire was really trying to support its borders and refortify itself. This fort was known as the Gibraltar of the Danube, a really important defensive point along the Danube for many various empires. Apparently there's 16 kilometers of tunnels dug underneath this, which made it nearly impenetrable, as they had cannons mounted on every side of the fortress, as well as turrets for riflemen at basically every feasible point. No matter what fortress you're going to visit in Serbia, there was a lot of bloodshed at it, and there was a lot of people building it. So whether it was the Ottomans being here, the Austro-Hungarians, the Hungarians after that, or the Serbs, these fortresses were quite active and absolutely very important. Today, it's a little bit different. No one's invading Serbia. So at the moment, this fortress is kind of like an artist refuge. There's 88 local artisans who actually have shops back in these kind of older homes here, where you can buy postcards and, you know, nice art. And it's a nice place for tourists to come see the beautiful countryside of Vojvodina. Underneath the fortress on the north side near the river, you'll find the Grassy Neighborhood, which is very, very, what I would say, Austro-Hungarian. It's got this really nice old European feel. It's got lots of really ornate buildings in various colors, very regal, very pretty. This really is the most European place that I feel that I've been in the Balkans. They're really a feel that you could be in Germany, you could be in France, you could be in any of these beautiful places, also Prague. But one extra thing, what I want to point out is that this clock tower, that's very famous part of the fortress, is known as the Crazy Clock Tower. And the reason that it's crazy is that the hands on the clock tower are actually backwards, meaning that the hour hand is the small one, is the big one, and the minute hand is the small one. And the reason for that is that fishermen on the Danube needed to know what time it was so they could come home for their Austro-Hungarian dinner. And so they would look at the clock and they could more easily tell what time it was. So now we're in the city center here in Novi Sad. And the first thing I want to say about this city itself is that we're at the heart of Vojvodina. Vojvodina is the northern region of Serbia. It has a very different culture and a very different historical makeup than the rest of Serbia, because this part was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire for quite a long period of time. The Serbian Empire was on the southern part of the Danube River. Here we are on the northern part. So you'll notice the city center here reminds you a lot more of something maybe you'd see in Austria, maybe something you'd see in Budapest, maybe something you'd see in Prague. The buildings and the style are very Central European, and I think for a lot of people who come here, This is not necessarily what you picture when you think of Serbia. Obviously, if you go to the outskirts of the city, you will find, of course, the very typical Yugoslav block housing and the scars of the socialist times. But that being said, this historic center is not one of those scars. I would wholeheartedly say that out of all the cities in Serbia, Novi Sad is probably the most charming as far as historical, significance and beauty that you can find. The other cities are a lot more complex and a lot more mixed, but this is just very, very European. It's the most European city that I think I've been to in the Balkans so far. The only thing here that really reminds me that it's still here in the Balkans is that once you get out of the very historic city center and just start walking the streets, you can see a lot of the buildings have that faded glory about them, that they're crumbling a little bit, that they haven't been retouched and kept up as well as what you would find in the city centers of a lot of the Western European cities. It kind of, for me, makes it a little bit more charming and a little bit more authentic, and it feels like you're in a place that has never truly changed, which is quite unique. Serbia is a very complex country because I think there's no static identity for what a Serbian city is going to be like. As you go more south, you really get that Balkan influence, the mix of the Turkic culture that had been here for so long. And the more you go north, because of the history, you get a really nice mix of the Austro Hungarian Empire's presence here and the other European powers that have passed through here. So every country or every city you go to here in Serbia, you're gonna get a nice mix. You have to mix it up. As we head down a little side street here, I want to comment on one thing that I find truly Serbian, and it's their use of graffiti as a means of cultural identity. And it's just everywhere you go in Serbia. It's just new buildings, old buildings, broken buildings, fantastically beautiful buildings are covered in graffiti. And here you can see a very typical communist sign. This is the sign of the Serbian Holy Cross, the Orthodox Church. And I think this serves because they had such hard times, especially in the 90s, that the graffiti and the arts making a really hard time beautiful became kind of like an identity of these people. And everywhere you go, there's amazing graffiti all over the place. And it's that kind of thing where it's like they have beautiful old buildings, but they also have this weird modern context of modern art, which I like. And right here, this church that's shining in front of you is the place where Albert Einstein's sons were baptized. So there's a big mix here in Serbia, a big, big mix. The last place in Novi Sad I wanted to show you was the Slobodia Trg, which I believe is Freedom Square. I might be wrong. So very typical Austro-Hungarian architecture. You have the Hotel Vojvodina, very beautiful. You have this really epic church, and a point of contention because since this was, of course, occupied by the Austro-Hungarians, this church is Catholic, and the other churches that you see around the city are Orthodox. So having their main square not have an Orthodox church, some people get a little bit angry about, but it's all water under the bridge to me. And then here you have some of the most delightful architecture. And the great part about this is you can see all the little details they go into, all of the different works they do with the plaster. There's a little knight up here. And this is just your very typical square that you would find in anywhere north or west of here. But it's just kind of weird that in a microcosm this exists in Serbia. And in a nutshell, that's what I would call Novi Sad. So that's going to do it for our time here in Novi Sad. Thank you guys for watching. Živeli, Fala, and see you in the next video.